everyone. My name is Jessica Mraz. I'm with New Mexico MainStreet. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a great presentation for you today. First and foremost, I want to tell you that this webinar is being recorded, and I will send you a follow-up email with that YouTube link later today. Sean is going to be taking questions throughout the presentation, so go ahead and type your questions in the questions panel, and he'll answer them as they come up. You can also download the handout, the presentation that Sean is going to be going over in the handouts tool. So go ahead and get that PDF there. New Mexico MainStreet is a program of the New Mexico Economic Development Department, and you can see all of the affiliate communities on this map. If you'd like to learn more about our program, please visit nmmmainstreet.org. And if you'd like to learn more about the Economic Development Department, please visit gonm.biz. We do have a couple of webinars scheduled. Next week's webinar is going to be about building and site improvements. So you can register for that webinar on our website at nmmmainstreet.org. While I have your attention, I just want to give a last shout out to the census. Please complete your census and encourage your communities to do so as well. You can learn more at icountnm.gov. And with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and welcome everyone to this webinar, where I'll be discussing the need for entrepreneurship support to be an element in every community's recovery strategy and reviewing models for this type of support and resources that communities can access. And again, like Jesse said, I would encourage everyone to use the chat feature to ask questions, and Jesse will be letting me know as questions come up throughout the presentation. So there's no need to wait until the very end to ask questions. And so my name is Sean O'Shea, and I am the founder of a firm called Hatchform that specializes in strategic planning and program creation for organizations that are engaged in economic development. And I approach the subject of this webinar from many angles, having worked as the program director for the Santa Fe Business Incubator, co-founder of and advisor to a few companies, and am currently working with entrepreneur support programs like Santa Fe Innovates, which is a tech accelerator for socially conscious founders, and a few others that we will discuss later in the presentation. And the presentation will basically go like this as an outline. We'll talk about current conditions and how all of this relates to economic development. We'll talk about models for support programs, and then we'll go into available resources both locally and nationally. So let's take a look at current conditions. We have seen, as you all know, unprecedented job loss, as illustrated in this graph compiled by the New York Times. And we can look at how monumental the job losses have been, especially when compared to those during the Great Recession just a little over a decade ago. Springboard here is an organization that tracks pedestrian traffic, and we can see in this graph to the left that foot traffic has plummeted year over year. This is, of course, particularly bad news for businesses dependent on the flow of foot traffic through downtown corridors and Main Street districts. But the market penetration of e-commerce has seen tremendous growth in just the past 8 weeks. We are seeing in real time the rapid collapse or stalling of old business models and the rapid adoption of new ones. And this is why innovation and entrepreneurship are so important. This quote has never been more applicable. And we're playing a little game. If you can name the historical figure who said this, please write it in the chat box and we'll pick a winner at the end of the presentation. And I'll see if I can get a hold of you and send out a gift card or something. And we're depending on the honor code, so if you can, please refrain from Googling. But we'll be interested to see your answers at the end of the presentation. So I'd like to take a moment and frame this discussion around entrepreneurship and innovation as they relate to economic development. And so in very broad terms, a community has three ways in which it generates new wealth. And these are exports, which in this case is bringing in outside money into the area, import substitution, meaning purchasing or using more products or services produced or sold in the area, and transfers, which is the government making a payment without goods or services being received in return. And economic development as a field generally represents and measures wealth creation as the creation or sometimes the retention of jobs. And so job creation becomes very important. And at their disposal, economic developers have three major program classes they work within to stimulate job creators. Traction, which is recruiting companies to relocate or expand to their area. Retention and expansion, which is keeping companies in the area and assisting in their expansion. And then creation and support, which aids entrepreneurs and innovators when they are just starting to create a business. And we can see from this graph that new firms have the highest rate of net new job creation, but this impact is sometimes difficult to see and is not as flashy and doesn't provide the immediate injection of employment like relocating an East Coast widget factory to your town does. And while high net new job creation is important, it does not capture the whole impact that entrepreneurship and innovation have on an economy. Joseph Schumpeter, in his book, Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, coined the term creative destruction. And as a side note, I'm sure many of you have his book on their shelves. It's called The Theory of Economic Development. And so I assume many of you being economic developers, you're familiar with his work. Schumpeter's creative destruction outlines a process where entrepreneurs and workers create new profit opportunities during times of disequilibrium and turmoil. This is expressed in waves that show the accelerated pace of innovation over time. And this shares characteristics with Clayton Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation, Dr. Christensen, who just passed away fairly recently. Dr. Jeffrey West, who is the former head of the Santa Fe Institute and lives here in Santa Fe, takes Schumpeter's ideas to the next level by mathematically expressing the imperative for innovation. Dr. West shows that unbounded growth requires innovation to stave off collapse. So supporting innovation is in reality supporting the continued growth and quality of life we have become accustomed to. Breaks in the system, like the one we are experiencing now, are nothing compared to the full-blown collapse Dr. West predicts were it not for innovations entering the system with regularity. And all of this matters because entrepreneurship is essential in translating innovation to the market so that it can stimulate growth, hopefully sustainable growth, increase productivity, and generate wealth and new jobs. Now we can take a look at some models and examples of entrepreneur support programs. And I tried to pick ones out that were immediately relevant and were here in New Mexico. So first are business incubators. Business incubators are basically the combination of space and programs and mentorship meant to accelerate the growth of early stage companies. In its strictest sense, an incubator is all those three things. It is space, it is mentorship, and it is programming meant to give companies an incubation period or growth period where they have a lot of their needs taken care of, they're in a safe space to grow, and they're provided with a lot of resources to grow. And then on the right here is the Santa Fe Business Incubator, which is a shining star for business incubation in New Mexico and a nationally acclaimed business incubator, which is a 30,000 square foot space that offers lab, office, warehouse, light manufacturing. They have a shared bioscience lab. They have a maker space. They have a small co-working space, and they have conference room spaces. The next are accelerators. And accelerators provide an idea or very early stage teams with curriculum and mentorship designed to validate customers and markets. Often accelerators come with funding, but you have to give up a stake of equity in your company, or they can charge for you to go through the program. And there's awfully heavy reliance on the cohort So the cohort are the people that you're going through the accelerator with, the other participants, as well as mentorship and connections to people in the industry or to other resources. An example, great example that's happening currently in Lovington is the Local Innovators Institute, which is an accelerator concentrating on food concepts. So working to validate different and varied food concepts in Lovington, and then utilizing a shared food truck to test the market for that food concept and that cuisine. Boot camps are another entrepreneur support program, and these are generally defined as short, limited workshops or training sessions that essentially give you an idea if you are just starting out or just had that light bulb go off in the shower of whether or not what it is you're thinking about could really be a business. And usually they're designed with to give you the power for an informed go or no go decision at the end of the process, which is usually short. Maybe a week at most. A day or two is typical. And this Hatchet is a boot camp that Gallup MainStreet Arts and Culture District is working on for that very same reason, to kind of draw out entrepreneurs, get them introduced to the ecosystem and to the organization, and then provide them with a little bit of startup support and help in deciding whether or not their idea could really be viable in the market. Co-working has gotten a lot of attention, especially with the troubles and turmoil that WeWork has been going through. And co-working is pretty simple at its base. It's pretty much just an organization that signs a master lease with a landlord, and then subleases out smaller spaces within that to usually startup companies, distributed workforces, solo workers, solopreneurs. There's a co-working space called Project Y in Los Alamos, which is great. They have a shared open co-working space along with dedicated desks. They have a kitchen area. They have a conference room. And they're working on getting some more private kind of phone booth spaces for people to be able to make calls in a more private setting. Maker spaces are also very popular. And it's essentially a makerspace is a place where you have access to shared equipment. And this equipment is usually either hard to use, so you would need some training on how to use it correctly or use it for whatever purpose you have, or it's very expensive, and so it's kind of outside the individual's ability to purchase one for their home. So you can go in and use the equipment in the makerspace. And there's a great makerspace, Future Forge in Silver City, and they've got a 3,600 square foot, and they offer a whole bunch of things like 3D printing and sewing, CNC, laser. Makerspaces are popping up quite a bit, especially around New Mexico, and they're really great assets for makers or people interested in designing or producing a product. There's of course an education aspect to entrepreneur support programs, and college, universities, and workforce development organizations, have for the past decade to 6 years really recognized the importance of entrepreneurship training. A lot of community colleges or four-year universities have entrepreneurship programming or classes. There's a great organization called the New Collar Network that's located in New Mexico, and they're developing a digital badging system or micro-credentials for individuals interested in pursuing a different path besides 2 or 4 year college or university. And so you can go through CNC routing, additive manufacturing, and they're developing an entrepreneurship badge as well. Networking is super important, especially for kind of coalescing ecosystems together. And networking can take a whole bunch of different shapes, and it's very, mostly inexpensive to kind of get off the ground and get started. And there's a great networking program organization in Santa Fe called Kick-Ass Entrepreneurs of Santa Fe that was started by Melanie Lency. And they are utilizing this idea of entrepreneur story time where entrepreneurs are invited to just tell their story and not to pitch, not to go through a big sales call or product description, but just tell their story of how they got started and why they're there and why they're doing what they're doing. And using this story as a process to build community social capital and larger amounts of community support for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in and around the area. And then, of course, there's tons of hybrids. And so there's very rarely an instance where you have a pure support model. Most often, there are combinations of things that make sense for the area or for the network or ecosystem in which they're operating. And a few of them, in New Mexico, again in Gallup, Colab Commons is an entrepreneur support center that's in its infancy right now, but being worked on. And it's a mobile entrepreneur support center, so it would take over a building in the downtown district, operate for a little while, but also serve as an advertisement, a marketing campaign for that vacant or underutilized space, so that when it's finally leased or bought, the entrepreneur support center would move to a different area of town. And they would include a little co-working space. They would have the boot camps in there. They would offer some other business and technical support to both startups and to current businesses in the district. The Lobo Rainforest is located in Albuquerque, and it's an initiative of a whole bunch of different organizations, UNM, a major one. And this combines space. They have office space. They have a lot of programming there. And they also have student housing there. So you can really incorporate students into the ecosystem or the scene that's happening there, because they have a lot of other businesses and startups and funds, and Sandia Labs has their technology transfer office there. So it's a cool synergistic place to be. And then finally, the Innovation Depot is not in New Mexico. This is in Birmingham, Alabama, but they have a really large innovation hub where they have they have business incubation, they have second tier, second stage business incubation for larger companies. They have an accelerator program. They have a fund. They have a co-working space. There are just a whole lot of support programs that are wrapped up into this one institution. And then it's interesting to look at, this all sounds great, but where do I even start? If I'm an economic developer or a MainStreet director or just an interested community member, how do I get going? And the approach that I would recommend is to look at building an ecosystem and not chasing after one silver bullet that's really going to try and solve all your problems. And so by ecosystem building, I mean that you can start with very little or very low cost programs to try and draw out the innovators and the entrepreneurs and the inspiring business owners in your community. And then it's about building up the resources and support systems available based on the needs of your particular ecosystem, because we're all different and we're all going to be working towards different things, and we're all going to have the ability or the capacity to provide different sorts of services to the people that are in our communities. And here's a nice approach that starts with mapping the ecosystem that already exists. So what is already available in your area, in your community. Maybe you already have an SBDC, or there's a West office close by. There's a Chamber of Commerce possibly, and they offer business classes, or there's a community college with a business program. A good way to start this process is just by asking, if I had an idea, where would I go? And then try and map out the different resources that are available at the different stages of as your idea grows into a business. I have an entrepreneur ecosystem mapping template if anyone is interested in. I'm happy to share with them and kind of go through how to use it. The next step is just identifying gaps in the ecosystem that's been mapped. So places where there aren't any services, or there's nothing that already exists, or where services that do exist aren't really helping as they should. Maybe they weren't designed correctly, or they're not really going after the right people to provide the most value. And then designing programs on your own to help fill those gaps. The models presented just now, a little earlier, can act as guides in this process. But again, everything should be tailored to your individual community and your community's unique situation. And then finally, it's to go and do pilot programs of the things that you've just designed. And not all of them will work. And it's good to look at failure not as a stigma, but as proof that you're working towards something. You just expand on the ones that work, and then you try to do it all over again. So you go back to the mapping, having inputted the programs that work that are already in existence, and then you look at it again. You look at the system again. It's a constant iterative process, but it is one that can be really fun and really rewarding for you and your team. Now we'll look at some available resources, and we'll kind of whip through these. And all of these are hyperlinked on the PDF, so you can just click on them and go to the website if you need to. The state's economic development department has a lot of great programs, especially to help out ideas and entrepreneurs. The Office of Science and Technology has a few really good ones that are worth checking out. The Clark Hewlings Fund for visual artists has they run an accelerator program, and they also run just these classes, seminars for visual artists or creative companies or individuals who want to turn their art into more of a business. The Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University has a series of sprints or accelerators. The New Mexico Angels are the angel investment group for the state, and they offer classes, and sometimes you can work with them to come into your community and do like an Equity 101 workshop. West is a great, they have an incubator in Albuquerque, and they have a series of satellite offices that provide really great business support and coaching. They also have a loan fund. The New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program is out of Los Alamos and Sandia Labs, and they provide free, no-cost technical assistance to businesses. Creative Startups also runs some boot camps and accelerator programs targeting the creative industries. The Small Business Development Centers are great for helping people think through their ideas, create business plans, access funding. The Catalyst Fund is a investment fund created by the state, administered by Sun Mountain Capital, where you can create a fund and get state money to help create it, and then it just needs a 1-to-1 or 40-60 match. Activate New Mexico is a program between ABQID and CNM, and they run an accelerator program. The NMFAST is a great program that helps people write SBIRs and STTRs. And then the New Collar Network we talked about is offering digital badging and other services to communities and maker spaces. And then on the national level, there's two really major ones. USDA and their Rural Business Development Grant offer technical assistance, training. They will fund construction sometimes. And the USDA has offices throughout the state, and it's definitely worth getting in touch with your USDA office to talk to them about their rural business development grants and their other sort of economic development related grants and services. And then the EDA has this 1.5 billion supplement out that was part of the CARES Act that is really allowing communities or economic development organizations to do a lot of really cool things, like set up programming, do feasibility studies, do economic development plans or other types of plans. They'll do a whole host of things. And they also have this Build to Scale program, which was previously the RIS for anyone that had applied to that. And this you can get money to develop and launch a program. They'll help you design a accelerator program. They won't capitalize one, but they'll help you with the organizational aspects of one. The industry challenge is an interesting one here. This year it was concentrating on businesses or ideas having to do with ocean technology. But we would hope that they would continue with other sorts of industries down the line. And then these are some other ones. For anyone that's been to a startup weekend, these are really great. These are free. They'll give you a lot of resources and things for free. AmeriCorps is a great volunteer program, and you can contact AmeriCorps Vista to try and get a program in your area or for your organization that can help launch a lot of these entrepreneur support programs. Global Entrepreneurship Week is a really fantastic, I think it's usually in November, right before Thanksgiving, and it's just a celebration of the ecosystem of all the things that are going on for entrepreneurs. And it's an international now program, so you can link with other areas that are doing similar things. The Kauffman Foundation offers a lot of studies and reporting and programming to help and assist growing entrepreneurship in your community. 1 Million Cups is another networking event actually run by the Kauffman Foundation. And then Stripe Atlas is an interesting one. I threw this in there because it's great for real like tech companies or companies that are interested in possibly creating to go after funding at a certain point. Stripe Atlas will help you set up all of your incorporation documents. And then there's also like a bulletin board and community aspect to it where you can ask other people how they did things. And then Strategizer is the site that Osterwalder, who created the business model canvas, he and his partners created Strategizer. So there's a lot of really good information there about the good business model canvas, value proposition canvas, and all the other resources that they're working on. And then finally, these are some trade organizations that have a lot of really good information on entrepreneur support programs and models. The INBIA is the International Business Incubation Association. GAN is the Global Accelerator Network. IEDC is the International Economic Development Council. GWA is the Global Workspace Association, which concentrates on co-working spaces. And NVCA is the Venture Capital Association, the National Venture Capital Association. And then with that, I am more than happy to take any questions, or if you have a guess for whose quote that was, you can shoot that out as well.
Hey, Sean. Dirk was the first one to correctly answer that. Did you want to give the answer?
Oh, sure. I don't have it here. Well, it was Vladimir Lenin, oddly enough. So congratulations. Great. I'm clapping, but you can't hear me. Maybe you can. So if you give me your contact information, your mailing address, or your email address, I'll try and get you a prize pretty soon.
I'll pull that from the registration list and send that to you. There was also some requests for that map, so if you'd like me to include that in the follow-up email, I can do that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's really just a series of slides that people can use as they walk through the process. But I'm happy to email it to you, and then maybe we can get in touch and I can just talk to you over the phone about kind of how to use it. Okay. Okay, just some more requests for that map. I'm not seeing any other questions. So go ahead and please type your questions now in the questions tool.
Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, please feel free. All my contact information is on the screen here, as well as in the handout. So feel free to shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to talk to you about any of this stuff.
Looks like there is a couple here. Sorry, Sean, for the delay.
That's okay. No, no problem.
What is what is your thought on incubators business model post COVID? What do they sell if they can't sell space?
That's a very interesting question. So I don't know if this is as like big an existential problem for incubators because they are primarily private spaces. So I know the incubator in Santa Fe anyway, over half of the businesses that were there were considered essential from the very beginning. And now that things are starting to ease a little bit, you're able to go into your own personal office as long as you socially distance while you're in any of the common areas. So while like conference rooms and things aren't necessarily in use, you can still go there as part of your, whatever your work schedule is. Um, the bigger I think uh, the bigger loser would be co-working spaces or any space. So there's going to be, I would imagine there, and I think we've seen this a lot. There's a shift towards sort of the people not liking shared or open workspaces that much. And this is just going to exacerbate that. So there's going to be a trend towards more private, um, separated office spaces. And so I think that's going to be a pivot that a lot of the co-working or other sorts of open models are going to have to make.
Okay, next question. What activities are showing the most promise in New Mexico to spark entrepreneurship?
That's a good question. I think that's, I mean, there's been a proliferation of these sort of non-equity based accelerator programs like the sprints or creative startups, um, runway pre-incubation program, activate New Mexico. Um, and I think that that's drawing a lot of people out and kind of giving them the training and, opening their eyes to what it is that's really necessary in order to be successful, especially in sort of a resource constrained state like New Mexico. So I see that as being a positive. Um, I think that there are attempts, while not all the time super successful, to sort of increase the capital stack inside New Mexico, and that would be great if that were to continue. Um, I think, yeah, I mean, I think those are the ones that I'm very interested in are places that like Lovington or Gallup or Los Alamos, or anywhere really around the state that are sort of taking the idea of wanting to have an entrepreneur support program, um, and instead of devoting all of their time and resources towards like building or outfitting a 20,000 square foot building, they're saying let's start from the programming side of it and what can we do to really help the people that are in our community that want to be entrepreneurs, that want to start businesses, and starting from there. So starting from the ground up as opposed to starting with large architectural planning documents.
Okay, next question. What can smaller communities do to help get a local scene going for entrepreneurs? Any recommendations?
Yeah, so I think I think it's what was recommended in the thing was, I think first it's to see what you've already got. So what's already happening there, and I think digging in quite a bit, you might be surprised to see what is already happening, and then saying, okay, what isn't there anything of that we really need or would really help. Um, And that could be, maybe there's no place for people to meet one another if they're interested in starting a business. So let's start like an entrepreneur happy hour, and let's see how it goes. Or let's start an entrepreneur coffee hour and just see how it goes. I think that there's no shortage of things that communities can do. It's just sort of the trying it and giving yourselves permission to fail and say, okay, this isn't working. It doesn't mean that nothing is going to work. It just means that that thing didn't work. So let's try something else and go after something different.
Okay, next question. Who are the best sources for lead investors in the region?
Oh, it's a very good question. So that's a difficult question. So the capital stack in New Mexico is definitely in its infancy. A lot of it depends on where you are. So, people like to, especially here, they will invest regionally or locally. So I don't know. I think that would be, I would love to take that question offline, and we can talk more about where you are and sort of what sort of funding you're looking for. And we can try and see if there's anybody that I know of. But a lot of it is just doing that legwork in the beginning to find out if there are any, accredited investors who are making investments who are interested in it in your local area. And if there are, how do you engage and activate them to want to be interested in investing in companies? There's a couple of, early stage funds that were created as part of the Catalyst Fund. One is at NMSU. I think it's called the Arrowhead Innovation Fund. Which might be which would be a good place to start, possibly depending on where you are. Yes, that's where I would. That's kind of a lame answer probably, but let's talk offline, whomever it was that asked that question.
Okay, next question. What do you see as the next big step needed in New Mexico to propel the ecosystem forward, get more funding rounds closed, exit events secured, etc.?
Sure. So I think a lot of it has to do with risk capital. I think that while there is some, while it's probably better than it has been, there isn't a lot. And so you have to be fairly well established and have sort of a market presence in order for someone to take a look at you. Where a lot of times, depending on your situation, you might not have the time or the personal runway to get to a point where you would have some sort of market penetration that would interest an investor that's in New Mexico. So that would help, I think. Educating people, activating and engaging people who might be investors to be more involved, or bringing in larger investment funds or regional funds into the area to do familiarity tours with companies that are interested in that kind of funding. I think the other one is that we need to have a statewide celebration of companies that are doing well or who are in a stage where they could or would need this kind of risk capital or venture or angel funding, and have just a catalog or a way in which people can access them. So it's not so much like if you have a really good idea, but you're in Luna County, you have to either leave, or there's not a lot of places for you to go to really accelerate the early growth of the company and get it onto a level playing field with people that are possibly your competitors in other parts of the country. So those are the two that I'd recommend off the bat.
Okay, just a recommendation from a participant to recommend 1 million cups and kick-ass entrepreneurs. Let's see here. Next question. Right. What would you like to see communities begin to do to use entrepreneurship to ignite recovery?
So I would like to see them start to support it. I think first, by drawing people out and assisting them however they can, whether it's getting with an organization like MainStreet or the Economic Development Department or some of the other ones that are listed to provide resources for them, or just saying that this is letting it be known that this is something that they will support and are interested in.
Okay, are there any unique cultural elements, challenges related to starting up a company in New Mexico that are not common in larger, more well-known ecosystems?
Well, I mean, one is access to capital, right? So there's, even in our sort of region, New Mexico lacks a lot of risk capital. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily. I mean, it is that it's a big state and people are really far apart, so sometimes it's difficult to connect with one another. But I mean, that's really largely becoming less and less of an issue. I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think holds back New Mexico a little bit is like the application of the anti-donation clause to say that there's no way that the government can set up funds with state money in order to invest in different industries or clusters throughout the state in a real meaningful way as a seed or really early stage sort of prop fund. I think that would be helpful, but there's not much really that we can do about it. Yeah, but I don't know if there's anything necessarily like that I'm aware of anyway that is like culturally different about New Mexico in this regard that would hold it back.
Do you know of any specific organizations addressing renewable energy, resilient communities, or transitioning from fossil fuels?
Any organizations that help in that? I'm not super familiar really with the renewable energy space. So no, but yeah, feel free to connect with me. Just shoot me an email, and I'd be happy if you have a specific. Let me know specifically kind of what you're looking for, and I'd be happy to help research it.
Are there any programs that are better for folks who don't have collateral resources or operating on reservation?
Like, I know it's hard because it's hard to get follow-up questions, but I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, in New Mexico, there's a lot of accelerator programs that operate virtually, especially now. So the ones out of our head center are doing that. Creative Startups is doing that. Activate New Mexico is doing that. And they're usually very low or no charge to participate. Those would be good ones to start with. I know the Navajo Technical College in McKinley County is a certified incubator, a certified state incubator, and so they would be a great organization to reach out to if you're in that area. I can't think of any offhand, but again, if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to talk it over with you.
Seeing this comment here, the New Mexico State Investment Office has recently allocated an additional $100 million or so for investment in New Mexico businesses to be managed through Sun Mountain Capital in Santa Fe. So this participant didn't see that on your list and just knew if you had any more information about that.
I don't. My understanding for that was that they were. Oh wait, if you're there, are you talking about the COVID loan response or about the actual like equity investment? That would be interesting to know. But yeah, I mean, I am all for activating the SIC to be more engaged in investing in New Mexico companies. Um, Oftentimes with larger funds like that, you're looking at safer bets, and I think what we need are, you know, instead of investing 500,000 or 2 million in a company that already has 200 employees, I would like to see more emphasis on investing 100,000 into 25 companies that are just starting out.
And yes, that was referring to equity investment.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I have another question. Can you point to any examples as to how incubators or accelerators have tapped into the EDA supplemental funding?
The new one, I don't know of any right now, but that's sort of an unfolding. I don't know of any in New Mexico that have done it. I assume they're talking about the 1.5 billion that was just allocated.
Yes.
But it would certainly, I mean, it's open for that. So I mean, they should, if you know, if they have the capability to do it, they should definitely do it.
With the city budgets taking a financial hit, should they carve out some funds to support accelerators more to jumpstart the economy?
I think it depends on where you are. I think that you know, it might be that you start um, with a networking or a boot camp or just a general meeting to see who it is that comes out and what their interests are and what sorts of resources or support they need, and just do these really small, you know, um, very cheap little events to kind of get the pulse of the ecosystem and then build from there.
And then do you have any insight as to why New Mexico is behind in economic growth compared to surrounding states?
That is a $6 million question right there. I don't really. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have anything that would be particularly insightful for that. I don't think. There's been. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say a lot of different things about why that is the way it is. Um, you know, I don't know. I apologize. That's a lame answer, but I don't know.
No worries. That was great. That's all the questions I'm seeing. So I
Okay.
think what we'll do is just end here, and I'll follow up with everyone with the YouTube link and all that good stuff. So thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Sean, if you want to send me that map, I can include it in the follow-up.
Okay, for sure.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.